to start winning races. We have learned that drag racing is a lot of torque on the rear of the car. In fact, I had the car at about 90 to 95% torque, so it's kind of my own fault. But when you pull 2.5 Gs, you learn the consequences of your actions very quickly. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make some steel axles as a backup because we're about to do a lot of drag racing and the carbon ones take a little bit longer to make. So we will have slightly heavier axles, but it's really nice to see that this is approximately 25.5 inches, thankfully. CarTech, of all people, has 33 spline axles in that exact length. Now these are 35 splines, so we're gonna have to switch out the insides of these. You can use the same CV joint, but we have to change this little star in the middle of it. So we got a little bit of rebuilding to do. That'll give us backups in the case that we can go back to back and break some parts and launch it harder than ever.
I felt like I was getting the wrong thing when I picked these up. Like he's like, okay, well this is it, and I was like, well, we got 2 of them. He's like, yeah, that's it. Well, you know, it said exactly what we ordered, cut down to whatever, and I was like,
you've been holding my shaft for way too long. Oh, those are heavy though.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, let's take a look at exactly what this is. You can tell the carbon immediately is way lighter.
Whoa.
Yeah, so they cut down this side because they said it'd be flat, should be bowed on the other side. So I had them cut it 1 inch off of this side. I don't think these are gonna break though. They're rated for like
a lot.
And so the only problem with this is that we have to change the inside of all of our CV joints because these are 33 spline. So this is the difference between 33 and 35 splines. I'm not gonna try and gall them up, but you can see it's more of a diameter issue. So you gain an extra whatever 500 to 1,000 foot-pounds of torque. They essentially look
Pretty similar.
Pretty similar, yeah. You can see right there, you can start to see the slight diameter difference.
33 on it.
Yeah. So everything else should be, the outsides of these should be the same. And these set me back like $160 a piece.
Jeez.
So 320 per. So it sucks because if we had 35 spline steel axles, we didn't have to spend an extra $600 swapping these around. Because the worst part is if we break an axle and we get a 35 spline, we now have to swap these back. These CV joints are very expensive, even though the base of them aren't, because they're all 300M, they're all polished, and there's just a lot of different things done to them. I set this on top of a rag, that way when you set these down, now these are the ones that were carrying all that torque.
That's crazy.
And it is crazy to think that several thousand pounds of torque goes through there. These are on angles, these are on angles, and so you have to do it the right rotation, and it gets confusing. It still blows my mind that all this torque is being transmitted through balls.
Yeah.
Okay, there's 2.
Oh. Yeah, do you do the rest? Like that? Okay, yeah. You're
There's
close.
3.
Okay.
Okay. I even have the camera in my face.
Oh yeah, this is nothing but pressure.
God damn it. God damn it. It starts getting really crazy where you almost pop one out trying to get the other one in. So it's like that. We're right to the very tail end. Go ahead and just get this last 2 in. Okay, there you go. So you can see right to the very edge. Isn't that gratifying? It's like, and so.
And then now you can't pull it out if you go straight. Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah. So it's only when it's way past its operation angle, and like it even stops right there. Like, see, but you have to like get it just right. Like they machine these things. It's like always just controlled chaos. I haven't used that yet.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
Whoever came up with this like angle and everything is insane.
Yeah. So there you can see, revisiting this. That's the total amount of travel. You guys leave me alone for a little bit. When measuring axles, and this is from CarTech, if you have it like this at all times, that's bad for this. My thought was, okay, we'll get them right in the middle, right here. But actually, your goal is to have them in the middle on the axle too. And so the end of this is sitting in the cup with like basically a 1/4 of an inch of room at maximum. Say you're in an off-road buggy and you hit a bump and the tire goes way, or you hit a ramp, the tire goes way down, it tends to pull out. When you ride at ride height, it tends to stay in the middle. So you want to make sure that the cup has a little bit of room for that space. This is unedited. Joel's just going to fast forward through the boring parts. I want to show you guys I can do it. So fat one goes to between the small ones, and we'll do them two in a row. I want to show you guys something super exciting for everybody that's been with me since the Blue Garage. Check this out. It's gonna be somewhere in here. I have my first like area of gray hairs. I don't know, can you see that? It's gonna be somewhere.
Maybe. Oh, I think I see one. Oh yeah, I see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa.
You see that? That's
Yeah.
a patch of gray hair. And you know what? That is super exciting to me because each one of those hairs to me stands for every time I've done a lap in this thing or even crazier pull in that. I am thankful to even have gray hair as a kid. I've always wanted to make sure I'd have gray hair. I always thought that'd be such a cool, distinguished thing. Thanks to Keeps, I actually would not have this hair. I can tell that based on male pattern baldness, that area would have already been gone by now, or at least much thinner, and those hairs would never have come through. So between all of my life experiences and Keeps, I'm very thankful to have gray hair. As you guys have heard me say before, 2 out of every 3 men experience male pattern baldness by the time that they're 35 and just shy of 40, and so it would have got me. It definitely runs in my genes. Keeps has a variety of options for preventing hair loss, especially related to male pattern style here and here and up at the top that you can see on their website. Very straightforward. The whole process is wonderful for me, and I've been a huge fan of them for many years, and that allows me to have gray hair. Hair loss stops with Keeps. To get a special offer, go to keeps.com/RobDahm or click on the link in the description. That's keeps.com/RobDahm. Boom. There.
That was pretty good.
You
A
can do that,
minute?
yeah, and you can do that all that was fast forward. There was no cuts in that. So I wanted to fact check this. You can counterbore where the C-clip goes. So which counterbore means that you can cut into this. But if you use this side, the problem is you've now shortened your axle length. So your axles can't be as long if you use this side. It's common practice to have this be the inside. There's more strength on the inside of there. And then this is the outer edge where the C-clip will go. You filming? Yeah, that's our beauty fashionistas. It's a lot easier to do it when it's completely fresh. Okay, so the downside is on the other ones, you could set it against this. If I let go, this actually goes all the way down to the ground. Okay, much better than my welding wire ones. I'm gonna grease up a little bit more on this side, and then we'll just have to kind of do this like in flux. And then we'll keep this one down. I'm gonna have to hold the whole thing up like this against the C-clip. And if you guys in the comments can tell me, is there a certain amount? Is there too much grease? Is there too little? I mean, obviously there's too little. Emotionally, I always think you put too little. Through rain, through snow, through sleet, all that sort of stuff at the post office, we're getting ready to drop off another set of about 300 orders, and it's sleeting, snowing, hailing out here in California.
Wow.
Whoa! Somebody just turned it off right there. Yeah, look at the ground.
That was knee-sized hail that I just walked through.
This is semi-common out in Michigan, as many of you know. But these guys, we heard, whoa, 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 whoa. That looks wrong. What is nice is the calculations all turned out right, because again, I was doing all weird numbers in my head. And so you see that distance right there is just over 1/2 of an inch. It's almost 3/4 of an inch, which is exactly what I measured. The distance from the inside of this cup to the inside of that cup, and then took 3/4 of an inch out, and that's the play that you should see. So these are exactly 26-inch long axles. The amount of space that we've freed up is criminal. We don't have any use for it. But the last thing we're gonna do is, because you can already see the grease is starting to come out, we're gonna zip tie those so that way we don't have foreign material in there and reduce the amount of wear. I'm gonna take this out so Isaiah can joyride the C8 a little bit more. Thank you. And then I think later tonight we're gonna fire this thing up and see how good these axles actually are. I've been hiding this from Joel because he keeps all of our batteries dead, and just like with the camera. And so I've got her topped off at 92%. And we're gonna go ahead and use this to jump the car. This thing's impressive because it'll tell you how much it's charging at. And so when you use USB-C with the appropriate charger, like a laptop charger, for example, you'll see an insane 60 watts is the highest I got. Incredibly fast. So you can watch this number going up and then turn around and start a car. This is what happens when you normally charge these. So USB-C, charging it from my monitor. This is in watts, and so that's volts times watts. This is a 5-volt system, so you're gonna see about 1.5 amps. So we're gonna go ahead and take this. We don't have to use the cable that came with it, but they have another cable that came with it. And we're gonna plug it into this thing.
Wow.
Yeah, and so the wild thing about USB and USB-C is that they negotiate the power. It doesn't just start giving power. They talk to each other and they're like, hey, are you good? What level are you at? And so it can charge at 60 watts, and that's almost 10 times faster. So look at, we're at 66%, and you'll see it switch to 67 very quickly. It's impressive.
88.
Everything's looking good just because this car can get out of control really fast. I just started in second gear, just let it go. And even in second gear, you see how much more power we have right now. Curious to see what the elevation change did, because now we technically have 6% more power, and hopefully the ECU accommodated for that. But right now we're just gonna do some safety checks, nothing crazy. I know all four were roasting. I felt just, I was like, oh. And you know, the best part is, even over the noise of the car, I can hear all four tires throwing rocks after I got done with that.
The guy at the end.
Yeah, the guy
is live.
I saw him, he was like, yep, it's time to show him what this thing can do. God, that was effortless. That was like 6, 7 PSI.
You can see that they do move.
That's exactly what happens when you get the centripetal force acting on the grease, is that it's going to sling it. We don't have the zip ties that we were just talking about a second ago, because we weren't going to launch it. As soon as it was like I think you said it, somebody else said it, Joel and you said it, you guys dared me or something, I don't know.
It was like, first it was on, then you're like, oh, maybe I'll take it around the block.
I turned into a different guy as soon as...
This guy's a menace. He like had his phone, he like wiped his camera, he gave me this look, and I'm like, oh, okay.
I saw it before he got out.
I did it with him by the car. I didn't know he was by the car until, thank God we have the side mirrors, because I looked at Joel.
He gave me a look, and I was like, oh,
and
shit.
I went to shift into gear, and I looked over, and I could see you leaning over. I was like, oh, shit. I have not told you guys. This is literally yesterday morning text to me, talking about accelerating the speed of getting something big going. And we just came off of something big, so that's why we hauled ass with replacement axles, and sure enough, the universe wants us to do something really meaningful, but a couple races all at once. And I think some of you guys know exactly what I'm talking about.
You gotta keep the bender going, baby.
Yeah, when you're on the heater, you don't stop when you're on the heater.
Yeah, the best way to not be hungover is to drink more.
Yeah, hair of the dog. Yeah, but except with horsepower.
Now that I have her up in the air, what I'm gonna do, or what I've been wanting to do actually, is just replace all the fluids, because we've changed the oil and stuff like that, but there's still oil stuck in the oil coolers, the oil lines, the tank, and stuff like that. So I want to know exactly how much oil I have in there. I want to replace all the oil, especially since it's a rebuilt engine. I want to replace my front diff fluid, because some flew out, and I just don't know how much is in there. I want to replace the trans fluid, because we haven't done that in a long time. I'm just going to go through everything over here, just make sure everything's okay. I got to redo the suspension. I got to take the camber out of the rears that we just did, because now we're doing straight line stuff.
In light of seeing how much we tore through the drag radials in the front, we switched to a different tire. We're on a Nitto NT555, which is like a mixture of like a drag and a road course tire, mostly road course. So I'm hoping that we can start figuring out what type of tire works best for the car for all the different things we want to do with it. I don't want to swap tons of tires unless we're doing hardcore drag racing. But even then, these are going to be quite nice for the rears until we start shaking the shit out of the drivetrain. But the fronts, as you will see, our very first time of doing a track day where we actually were trying to compete, drag radials are not the solution. And it's nice to be able to say that with absolute certainty. They don't do lateral movement at all. They just shred. It's really impressive, actually, to see it firsthand. We're hoping that these 100 treadwear tires help. They get a little too much groove for what we're doing because we're never going to take this car out in the rain like that. These are one of the few tires that actually measure out to the same diameter almost exactly. So let me show you guys that real quick. So one of the super like secretive things that people didn't understand about Lamborghinis in particular is they're like, you have to use this specific tire, otherwise the car will break. And you'd ask why, and nobody knew why. But the fronts and the rears on that car had to be the same height. And the reason why is that means your center diff, which in our case is the Nissan GTR center diff, now has to try to adjust. And it's not meant to adjust, it's meant to kind of more or less clutch in and lock in and spin all the wheels separately. So if you have different sized tires and you lock that thing up, that means that you're putting different speeds to the front and the rears. In this case here, we'll just say this is a relative size, and we'll just kind of do this. So we're looking at just shy of this 85. And when we do that on these, they're a little bit smaller. They're close enough to where I can let a little bit of pressure out of this, and then the size is exactly the same. These are much lower pressure. I'm guaranteeing you these are probably at 35 PSI.
Yeah.
That's another thing working against my measurements right now. These are at 10.
So I just picked this up from Jay Real over there. He bounced the whole assembly together for me. I brought it over there in 2 pieces, and they gave it to me in 1. He said he put a spacer in here because the bearing wasn't seating properly, and then the nut wasn't seating properly either. So I guess he had to cut that down a little bit, and he said it must have been from the beginning. You know, we've been putting a hurting on it, so that's what happened. That's why I backed out. So now it's all balanced the way it needs to go. So if you ever take it apart, he marked it to make it go together that way. And she's all good and ready to put more hurting on.
Jim Reel himself and then all the people there are amazing. And so they're the ones that took the idea of doing the drivetrain and turned it into reality. They keep helping us out big time. And they came up with, actually this was their entire solution to begin with. Yeah. And we've been putting a lot more torque than we originally intended through that. So it's nice to see that everything's lasting. And we never balanced this. We made that piece ourselves after our weird experimentations. And so we didn't even balance it. So they've just balanced everything. So our whole all-wheel drive system is much more stable at high RPM. So Haltech's here, and we're doing a whole video about the car and what we've done with it. And I'm a big fan of, putting my money where my mouth is. So it's time to fire it up.
Having some trouble there?
New front tires are painful.
They're too good.
I did a real quick transfer of all the files that I'd been working on over the week. And so that was my first time doing my new launch control with new boost control, new traction control, like just all different strategies. And I think, I don't know if from video is apparent, but from the seat,
yeah, she's good.
It was gone. It was gone. And you can actually see this really wild pattern. And I'm curious if it's from the tires sitting or if I have some sort of drivetrain slop. But you can see, and you'll see that in the logs. You'll actually see the tires surging and going, but that's data. That'll tell me exactly what I'm doing, and I can just fine tune it just that little bit more. We just pulled 1.85 Gs with cold tires for that launch. So that was an extra 0.3 Gs than our previous attempts. We're getting closer and closer to dialing that in. We still had a lot of wheel slip, but tuning, that's what it is all about. This is probably one of the scarier things that can lead to one of the most fatal things on this car. There's a reason why we haven't had that happen yet. We're very observant. We might not be the best at everything else, but we always make sure that we're watching things that we know are weak. And so this is one of the very first parts we ever created for the car. It is made out of 6061 aluminum. The rears are made out of 7075. What do those numbers mean? This is general use aluminum. It's softer. It's actually used in almost all car parts anyway, but we are using it for threading, and in this case, it took a beating. And so this is partially because of people threading and misthreading it over the years, trying to set it up to begin with, but it's also because of the sheer amount of torque and horsepower it's created. It turned it almost into a joystick, and so the threads got flattened on one side and then got pulled out on the other. And we saw it happening with all the racing that we've done recently, and the even more insane racing that we've got to do up front. We are going to helicoil it. Now, of course, somebody's going to say in their time certs, and if I put time certs in here, somebody's going to say, why didn't you helicoil it? But either way, the goal is to get the bolt that is made out of steel to contact with threads that are made out of steel. We're going to do a traditional insert right here. I'm going to be very particular about how I do these because A, They are much larger, and so the room for error, angle-wise, is much greater. It is something that I've worked very hard to get it vertical, very close. So drilling it straight down, drilling it so it's, the upright is exactly upright, so then we can thread these threads to make that insert. This doesn't look like it's going to make much of a difference when it gets cut. It shows you just how much material has been moved. So a couple things I noticed right off the bat is that this piece is actually pretty deformed. Deformed. Inside the thread area, it's undergone a lot of tension. So I would very much like to turn these uprights into steel, which is one of the big plans in the near future, because even the helicoil is still going to be not fully seated. It'll be mostly seated, like safely mostly seated. You can actually see in the bottom the hole is deformed because it almost used it like a joystick or like a pivot. The top area actually stayed pretty solid, and it was pulling and pushing down here, pushing the threads. So the threads are actually wider than the bolt was in this case.
Wow, so that was probably messing with your alignment as you drove?
Yeah, and it was also not centered. Like it kept getting threaded in miscentered, so that didn't help it either. So it was actually being threaded in at a slight angle because you have all the weight of everything on here. You're like trying to get in there and trying to get a thread, and you think you get a thread, and you start going down, and it was actually going at an angle and tearing up the threads, and then creating more threads down at the bottom. You can still see threads over there that will affect the insert, but not too much because that's the inner side of the insert, so I'm not too worried about that. But that just shows you how much force was being applied on the aluminum. The table's maxed down, and the chuck is all the way up. I don't have enough room to put even a little pointer to touch the tip of that. So I can't center this from wobbling unless I bring it down like this, which would very much help. And then I run into the problem of, well, where do I grab the piece? So either A, I grab it up here at the very top rows of the threads, which honestly at this point is probably the best solution until I get those first couple threads going. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. It's for very good reason. I do not want this misaligned. Threads. We have two things we need to do now. One is make sure that was long enough for the standard helicoil, because if it's not, then we're gonna have helicoil sticking out. And two, we have to make sure the helicoil is long enough for the bolt that we're going to be putting in there. We have more bolt than we have helicoil. We need to put 1 1/4 helicoils in there to use all of that. Because if we only do it in part, again, now we're the moment that's going on here, we want it taller, so that way it's not working on a couple threads. So this helicoil kit comes with this, basically a liner, and the way that helicoils work, they're this big spring, right? And so they're always larger than they need to be because they want to press against the outer wall. And so this kind of gets it all set up and lined up, ready to go. You can see it's really wild there. You can actually see the helicoil working, and then you break it off right in there on the bottom. So this little L-shaped thing breaks off, and then you just have the threads. We are not going to do 1 1/4 threads, and the reason why is I want to get this little piece out. But what we are doing is one of my favorite things, preparing ahead of time, is some red Loctite.
Ooh, you mean business?
Yeah, I mean business. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually take a Q-tip and do all the threads, so that way it doesn't bubble up. It doesn't have like a ball of it, and it goes through the helicoil, the spring, and it's on the inside. I want it just on the wall, so I'm going to be a little more even with that. We'll go ahead and set this on the surface. That's the first time I've used this blue thing, but
I like the noises.
there we go. So I'll go ahead and take this tool out. Mind you, I did clean out the threads. So yeah, look, you can see the red kind of pouring through. That was exactly what I wanted to have happen. Is minimal. That we're not gonna put this bolted and leave it in there. I'm very pleased with how this looks. Okay, look at that. Obviously, solid. That's not thousands of pounds of force, but that is.
You're pretty strong.
Oh, stop. Think about what happens if this breaks off. That whole wheel folds pretty catastrophically, especially at high speeds. I personally feel like this makes me very happy and feel safe with this. Now, we do have one last little bit to it. Given the circumstances, that's infinitely stronger than it used to be, and I feel safe driving the car with this in here. I'm facing my demons right now because this is something I wasn't able to do earlier prepping for the TV show, but I can look at it and I can work on it. I have no excuse, and it is the steering angle. This car slides its tires as it shouldn't because of the steering angle, and it needs a little bit more Ackermanns. It has no Ackermanns, which means that when you draw an imaginary line from the rear diff to the front steering through this pivot, there should be almost a straight line. That's full Ackermanns. And so that just means at low speeds, the inner tire is going to turn at the right radius, and the outer tire will turn at the right radius. That's mechanically the most ideal for lower speeds. Higher speeds, it gets all crazy from there. But at least for this car, pushing it around and going under 60 miles an hour, drifting or whatever, it would be better to have this steering further towards the brake rotor. Now the brake rotor sits right here, so if I go this far, that's actually going to hit the brake rotor. The other thing is that how far you are from the center of this pivot, so the pivot's hidden inside of there, the further you are, if you move an inch, the tire only turns a couple degrees. If you're right here and you move an inch, you've turned the tire almost like 50 degrees. So the distance from the center of this tells you how quick your steering's going to be given the same steering rack. From that imaginary line to the rear diff, up and down in this case, or in and out really, tells you how your tires are going to turn compared to each other. I can't go much further in because I have a button head Allen right there. So I have 1, 2, 3 ways of securing this metal to the upright, but I can always take that out. And then the next problem becomes, once it's in as far as possible, right? It'll now begin hitting there, and it'll begin hitting here. So we would cut this out, and I would probably cut or grind a relief inside of here, so that way I can still maintain a tighter turning radius. All the weird things that you have to juggle just to make one small change on such a custom setup. But you should see the reason why we did this was because of those threads, and these are the good ones. This is the good side. And those threads still look kind of scary. Let's take a look at the finished product. So you can see that little bit of red Loctite holding the metal, the steel into the aluminum, but the threads are solid.
Yeah,
and of course it's steel on steel now.
They feel really, really good. Way better than I did before. And Rob was last year like, hey, I made these and they should be reversible and save us actually a lot of time. So these two holes used to be a little bit forward over here. I just put this side onto that side, and then they went forward. So that's going to help out a lot with, very minimal effort. It's going to weld this guy back because that guy broke just a little bit, and just the alignment, and she's ready to steer.
Raining heavily, so you can hear the pitter patter on the roof.
I felt that.
The water just came on his face. A lot of you guys pointed out the same thing I saw early on, but because you guys pointed it out, it made me go, let me double check that. And sure enough, we found a major problem with particularly this wheel. So I don't blame the company that mounted the tires, but when they put the beadlock rim on, part of the lip of the rubber actually got trapped outside of the beadlock. It actually was trapped between the bolts. It was actually touching part of the bolts. There's a channel inside here where the bead sits and then gets clamped with this, and they actually accidentally had it sticking out further. So A, that part of the tire was higher or closer into the center of the wheel, and B, you could watch this piece of the rim wobble because it was sticking out further. So they torqued it properly, did everything else, but it's a very tight situation, so it makes sense that the whole thing wants to slip inward, so you have to be very careful with that. And the reason I noticed that myself, it was this spot right here. You can actually see where I hit it with a hammer with a rubber mallet to try and pull it out. This was sucked in considerably, so it's much more consistent. And I went from almost a quarter of an inch of out of roundness to less than 50 thousandths of roundness. So I'm sure we could address that a little bit more, but because the tire's been ran improperly, for now I think it's going to be okay.
He put some badass threads in here, so I couldn't be the only one to fill them. So I was like, here, come over here, fill these threads the way they line up and the way they go in.
Oh yeah, you can just see that bolt going in. Look at that, it's been threading and it's not loose at all. So worth the effort because of how scary everything else was getting to be.
We care about Rob's life a little bit, you know?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. We have red Loctite holding the helicoil in. We don't want to put red Loctite on the inside because then you're going to pull the helicoil out, or at least have a good chance of that. So we're going to use blue, but we're actually just mostly concerned about vibrations. So we always do a visual check anyway. So we're going to use, think of this more like a PTFE tape, but it does thread seal and thread lock a little bit. And so that's
Kind of like Hylamar, but
yeah, like Hylamar.
sticky.
Yeah, because it says it doesn't dry.
It's just a precaution, and it doesn't put too much taxing effort on the threads. We now have steel threads, so pretty much a nice safe way of taking it a step further than not putting anything on the threads at all. Something that nobody talks about, because all like traditional like drag racing or road course stuff is mostly focused on rear wheel drive only vehicles. All wheel drive has another layer of putting power to the front of the car. Steering angle, Ackermann's that we've been talking about a little bit, tends to make a difference on road courses. It has especially a lot to do when you're powering out of a turn. This car understeers like crazy, and there are a lot of simple reasons why. Even with the shit chassis setup that we have, we should actually make some serious improvements just with minor adjustments. With this car being 103 inches long, and the steering center to center is basically 66 inches. Long story short, you get about 65% out to in. And what I mean by that is that if we go forward an extra 4 inches on steering, we have to go out 60% of that to keep in line with the rear differential if we're driving for perfect, what's called Ackermann. Right here is about 0. So we were in, so we've gained about an inch out. But to have true Ackermann steering, we'd actually hit the brake rotor. The only solution for that is to bring it in more, which I would like, because that would gain us quicker steering ratios. But for now, this is a quick, distinct improvement just by flipping these from one side of the car to the other.
So Rob actually has like all the exact math and time that it takes for the clutch and our delay slipper valve and everything like that. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to minimize the dead space that there is by making it a hard stop. So he presses the pedal all the way down, it stops on this, and there's no extra dead space. And so what I'm doing, I got this little rubber stopper piece that has a little bolt on it, so that way I could adjust it, because you know you gotta adjust sometimes. You can just have it at a solid spot because the clutch wears out, whatever the case may be. But I'm gonna put this guy about right here, and we did it yesterday where I had it up in the air, I had him up there, and I was moving the tire, and then I saw the end and stop of the clutch. So it's gonna be about there middle, and so I'll be able to adjust forward and backwards. You got it.
It's not moving.
I didn't do nothing to that.
I'm joking. Wow, that is so much shorter of a throw.
It's like a bump stop now. We have
Oh, I love it.
Rubber.
Well, that's what I was telling the guys off camera is when you get nervous or even just intense moment, you are focused on very raw human movements. The same thing when you talk about home defense with guns. You're just going to like that. That's when you...
Well, that's why you train to be a professional.
Right, but even if you're a trained professional, you use your primate brain. You focus on just on-off, and there's no reason to like have it do anything else. So fully off, fully on. What would happen is it would be a whole second of from full pedal in, the clutch fully engage. So the problem is that 0.4 seconds of that was actually the slipper valve slowly coming in and touching, the clutch was touching, but it wasn't engaging the car. The tires weren't rolling, nothing. So there's 0.4 seconds that we lost, and that's exactly, coincidentally, that's the exact sort of reaction time I was having when launching at the last yellow light until the moment the car transmits enough torque from the engine to the drivetrain. And so our goal here is to have that all gone. And so then we have about 0.2 seconds right now after that where the slipper valve is engaging and the tires are starting to move, and then the power of the car kind of takes over. Now it's locked in. We're going to fine tune all of that. We might change the slipper valve sizes, but you can hear it, but it's not, now it's not traveling. We'll increase a little bit of wear to the clutch, but we'll have it where it's right at that edge when we're coming to a drag race where the car doesn't roll forward, but it's basically pre-staged. I would almost want to hold it back with the brakes, so that way all of our linkage and everything is ready to go. It's not slop. So that way there's no drivetrain shock. All we're dealing with is the driver focusing on reaction time and steering, but the clutch and gas are both being digitally controlled. So right now I would have the clutch fully in, the gas fully in, and then when I react, just let go of the clutch and keep the gas fully in. Now right now I still love, shifting. Even then we could have that being digitally controlled too. It's all in the wiring.
So Rob's comfortable with me taking about 2 thou off of this because I put it on. And I checked it when I put it all together and it moved, but these are free-floating rotors, so it wasn't until I bolted down the wheel, and after I bolted down the wheel I didn't check. My fault. I should do that. Chalk it up on the old lathe and take 2 thous off of it,
Easy access, huh?
Yeah, it's has its perks.
With all the little small adjustments we made in the front end of this, it also is a chance for me to test my launching in. Now it is very cold out. We're currently at 51. Tires aren't warm, but again, it gives us a chance to test under less than ideal conditions. And so I'm gonna warm the car up and then do another launch. But again, I'm dropping the RPM that it launches at and trying to have more control over the boost, so that way I don't have it just shock the whole drivetrain. So it's really interesting stuff when you have too much power not to have control over it. So the clutch situation is a little bit more complex than it initially looked like, is that when you put the clutch in all the way, you are able to clear all the dog teeth from engaging, but I think that maybe the clutch itself can slip and slide a little bit. There might be some harmonics, whatever the case may be. When the car's off and the clutch starts to engage the rear wheels, that's a different spot than getting the car into gear and not having things spinning. Now, it's okay if it spins a little bit, but we don't need it rubbing and just wearing the shit out of the dog teeth engagement. Trying to get as much pedal movement that we can, and then we'll see how much we can pull back out for launches. Even if it grinds a little bit, as long as it's not actually engaged, it's just like parasitically being dragged with it, that's okay to me. But we don't want to wear the shit out of an expensive transmission. If you can.
That was way better.
That was way better. Oh my god.
I felt so much more acceleration. What I think we should do is turn things to 120 frames a second on the main camera so we can watch it.
Okay, I had it on 60 right now.
Okay, yeah, we'll go higher.
Okay.
I need to watch the suspension squat. I need to watch all 4 tires from a kind of neutral location.
Okay.
Look at this. Straight lines are what we want. We want nice and stable everything. The boost didn't go out of control. The throttle stayed at 55%. On launch, it was at 47%. What you can see here is it built and held 10 PSI exactly how I wanted it. It held, more from here, but you see no dip, like the minimal dip right there. We can look at the tires. They were obviously sliding all through that launch, but let's see how much G-force we were pulling right there. 1.6 Gs. So it was sliding the whole time. That's on cold tires. We'll warm the tires up real quick and do another test of the same exact numbers to see if it's a cold thing and we can get away with cranking it up a little bit more. I'm determined to make this next launch the first time the car launches and has the tires stick the entire time instead of rolling and burning out. So we're gonna go ahead and do a quick warm up, and I turned the boost down from 13.5 pounds to 12. So I'm hoping that the combination of those two finally get us at an area where we can meet in a middle ground where we just accelerate like a bat out of hell and it's not just bouncing off the rev limiter, slowly catching up. So let's see what happens. Those fronts are starting to catch more. So close. I'm gonna close the throttle even more until we're gonna do it this time for sure. It's getting closer. If we keep going right now, I'm just not gonna get there. I don't wanna keep testing and braking the car. I can do some math now and use that to my advantage to get this thing to launch. But the front wheels are actually getting close to hooking. They keep getting close and then break free. Get close, break free. So I know I can start measuring things very quickly. You can actually see the front tires right here in the red lines. You should see the speed going up like this, and so you see the front tires dropping down to get traction and then accelerating to try and help the rear tires. We're definitely at the limit of the rear tires right now, but I got a lot of math to do before we go and do it again, but we're on to something. It is getting closer and closer. There we go. We pulled 1.9 Gs.
Better.
Yeah, it's getting fat. Like, just based on the G-force alone, we know that we're getting faster and faster on those launches. And that last launch, I didn't warm up the tires. They were still, I would assume, a little bit warm. This is incredible. There are a couple things to be learned from this, and we'll be going through all of the logs one by one tonight with a little bit of hot chocolate and everything. I'm going to be looking at making sure I distribute the weight side to side so the tires aren't overloaded or underloaded compared to each other. That's a big thing when you're drag racing. You want to make sure both sides get 50% of the weight. We'll look at the slow motion, the ultra slow motion of the weight transfer, see if there's any way that we can keep more weight going to the front of the car. As much as we want the weight to transfer to the rear, because we have bigger rear tires, we have massive front tires and they're getting even massiver. There's a lot of different things that we can fine tune for this, but I think the results speak for themselves. Less power and these tracks will start drying up. We're gonna start winning races.
Is this the first time you've shown anybody 12 inches on the ground?
This was a late night idea of mine, is if we want to win a race, we want to have as much meat on the front and the rear as possible, and I realized that it's my limitation to not have wider front tires. It does limit the amount of turning radius we have, and we might have to cut stuff out of the front of the car, but why not have 315s in the front? It's a little bit of work, but that's stuff that is in our wheelhouse.
Actually, I put it down, it looks like it's gonna be all fine.
They're the same offset on the outside. It adds the extra inches on the inside of the car, so we're gonna see exactly how it fits from the inside. So what we're gonna do right now is simulate the car launching and having to turn, because all 100% of the weight is off of the front of the tires, so this is a potential maximum, and we're gonna see what would happen under these circumstances. So we're gonna go ahead and
All right, stop.
Yep.
That's, yeah.
What did it hit?
It's into the upper arm.
Yep. On that spot, and equal and opposite on that side?
It's not touching yet. You have a good inch before you touch the.
Okay.
So it's just the front part on that, and then let's see on the lower arm you're perfectly fine.
Yeah, you won't hit under shot. The lower arm's the closer one on braking. Okay, so that area, it's like 30 degrees. It's not. I will hit it. I will definitely hit that on accident.
Yeah.
It's.
How much steering?
Steering wise, that's 180. So that's actually a good way of remembering it. I can only go to 180, so I'll do it the other way as well. And there's 180 to 100% the other way.
Okay, you have
More room?
you have more room.
Basically, we have 360 degrees of turning on the wheel, which doesn't mean much relative to anything else, but at least I can remember that. Okay, so this is just ride height, which is good, but let's see what happens when we turn it. Now the scrub radius is no longer on the center of the pivot. There's extra meat in here, so you're actually having to force that outer part at a greater moment, and so it's harder to turn. Let's see, so there's 180 right now, which we should
more.
gain.
Yeah, you have a lot of room.
Yeah, you gain room now. So,
Which I guess realistically you wouldn't be turning, accelerating when you're.
no, you shouldn't be. But when you decel, so here we'll. So I gain that much more.
You still got a little bit more.
Yeah. So here's our actual travel height right here.
I see.
So we got that spot there. We'll definitely hit all this area. The major circumstances that I'm thinking are accelerating, straight line, decelerating, straight line, turning without much G-force, and then turning and braking or turning and accelerating. Those are really where you start pushing this. Now, we're not going to do track days with this, so I'm not worried about those extremes, but you also don't want to shred the tire if you have to make quick change and you're already on the brakes or something along those lines. So this is actually pretty critical. More importantly is we don't want to feather how much we slam on the brakes. So all of these wheels are technically meant for a C6 Corvette rear wheel. And these are the 10-inch options that we currently have on the back that are on the fronts normally. And these are 12. So we've gained 2 inches of rim width on the front on each side. So we've gained a total of 4 inches of total rubber in the front because the tires I sized properly to the rim. Our tire setup just got even nastier.
Nice.
Is this supposed to be maxed or no?
No, we're not maxed yet.
So there's still more to go?
Yeah, I knew we were gonna hit something. Now that's again, if we stick with these stronger spring rates, we might be fine. But this is just approximation only. 3.5. So this is at the beginning of the bump stop, which is a fair place to be. We can actually twist the upper control arms, rotate them in there. There's a reason they're slotted up and down. And looking at the front of the car, it'd be twisting them like this or this produces either anti-dive or anti-lift effects, depending on what you're looking for. So in this case, what we might want to do is have it where the car doesn't nosedive, so it doesn't use as much of the shocks. That sort of stuff comes in heavy for the Indy car. But the idea with an Indy car, or more importantly, like a ground effect car, like a vacuum car, you don't want the car leaning forward and pitching back and forth because you're trying to maintain the consistent amount of ground clearance on the whole bottom of the car. That's something we'll play with this as we go along, but this car, it's negligible. Say you hit the brakes, well now you've created this wide wedge underneath the car and it changes the aerodynamics. Go to give it gas and it picks up. So there's a lot of anti-dive and anti-squat and anti-lift, 3 different things that you would do with twisting the control arms on the car. On this car, it's all-wheel drive, so you actually want less anti-lift, and especially since we're putting bigger front tires in here.
We're lifting a lot right now.
Yeah, it lifts a lot, and the rear squats. So it's funny because there is actually some level of anti-squat in the rear. It's not 100% anti-squat, so the car still has a little bit, and when it guns it, it squats. So because it's all-wheel drive or front-wheel drive, you want to have a lot of anti-lift and anti-squat so the weight doesn't want to pick up and transfer back.
So what I did was I chopped this guy off right here because it was going up this way. We'll have a little bit more clearance right here. This was all extra. You see it's even coming out over here, but I did clearance that just in case the wheel wants to go up more this way. I chopped this little piece off, which I'm going to chop a little bit more right now just so we have more clearance. That's the deal so far.
So we have a current clear goal set up in front of us. The car weighs 3540 with me in it, roughly. I want to get that car weighing 3499, nothing more. Any bit of weight out of the car helps, and especially if it comes out of this side of the car. So we are going to pull as much weight as we safely and easily can before the event to A, balance the car side to side, and B, have less weight just so that way the car can accelerate and get out of the hole much quicker. Somehow it's accelerating backwards without me. I don't know what. Oh, there you go. One of the things that accomplishes multiple solutions at once is reducing the length of this hose here. I have learned because of the IndyCar stuff, everything has multiple reasons. And one thing that the IndyCar thing does that shits on everything we do is that the oil or the coolant is either cooling the motor or being cooled off by the radiator or being regulated. They minimize the length of all the travel of all the hoses. I thought, okay, cool, more hose means more like capacity. That you're thinking about it wrong. Maybe that should be a bit another cooler, but not the hoses themselves. And so what I've been wanting to do is take this hose, it loops all the way around and comes back to here. I can cut it at least 12 to maybe 16 inches off of this hose. A, we don't have as much of a travel length for the oil to get to the system, so it actually reduces pressure, head loss, and reduces weight, because the stainless steel hose adds up very quickly in terms of weight. We are in a realm of not diminishing returns, but points where, like, is it worth the effort? But in this case, this has been driving me nuts to begin with. A little bit over a foot off of this, and imagine it filled with oil, which it was completely filled with oil. So we have that much less oil just sitting in the car when it's running or even idling or sitting or launching, most importantly. That was a little painful, but I got it. And so here you see, they call it olive, and that goes inside of here. These aren't speed flow, these are Holley, but we've been using them for a long, long time, and they're starting to leak a little bit around the O-rings, which aren't in here, but I feel confident enough to reuse the Holley Earl ones. We've zeroed the scale out for my weight, so we can see how much this whole door weighs.
53.
53 pounds. That would be 100% of the weight we're trying to get out of the car if we had no door at all. The glass, of course, makes a big percentage of that, and all the steel inside of it. What we're going to focus on first is the brain dead, easy, obvious answers here. So like all of this inside of here, we're just going to put hole saws through because that's not the chassis of the car. It was back then. It isn't now. So it's just extra material. So we're going to just hole saw a lot of holes through there, get extra material out of there. Same thing with plates like this. Put a hole through there, and so on. And we should drop a lot of weight because there's a lot of thick steel on this side of the car. That's a really drastic way of saving weight, 200 pounds on that side. I get it. I get the point.
I went in there and I kind of just marked about yay where the circle is, and then I put a finger space in between. My fingers about 1 inch apart, and so that makes 8 holes that we're gonna go across 8 3.5 inch holes. Yeah. That seems pretty big. But what I like to do is I like to do my guide hole because I don't want all this weight, especially when they're this big. I don't want all this weight circling around. If I move, whatever it might catch. So I like to do my pilot hole first, where I go back in with this guy, and I already have my guide hole, and I'm able to just fuck shit up.
Gift from a good friend of mine, and you'd think it's absolutely useless, and it is one of the most critical things when it comes to what we're doing for the 4-rotor. We are corner balancing, most importantly making sure that when this thing launches, both rear tires particularly experience the same amount of load as the car accelerates and as the car is sitting there getting ready to launch. If you put different amount of load to each of the tires, you're going to get different results. We want to have consistency between the 2 tires so that way I can consistently launch the car. So why the linoleum? Well, that is actually meant to let the car slip a little bit when it's sitting on top of these. Now there are much fancier ways of doing it, but this certainly gets one step of the job done. Now to make sure it doesn't affect your weight, we have to zero the thing out before the car touches the ground. But we're going to be messing with ride height, and we need to see right now not the total weight as much as what is on each corner. We're hoping that the car's lost a little bit of weight with, we haven't done much.
I felt like 5 pounds out yesterday.
Okay, okay.
I could have amount out yesterday.
It's close because we're at 3170. So,
Yeah.
so it's got to
We
be.
did lose a little bit.
Whoa! Look at our numbers. They're looking.
Solid. Almost solid.
So we're definitely front bias. So if this was a prep car, we'd actually be in better shape because prep cars are supposed to be a little bit front bias.
Okay.
No prep, you want 50-50 or up to 52% in the rear. Now that's rear wheel drive, no prep. Right side has about 30 pounds less. So one of the simplest things would be to shift the gas tank over. Once I get in, it's gonna have more weight, so I forgot about that. Our numbers get even closer.
Oh, it was at 222 for a second.
So my fat ass, there's a 20-pound difference back here, but look at this. The front on this side makes up for it. This side only has a couple more pounds. We must be hitting something because look at, we're only at 3220. This is too low for me being in the car.
Oh, there
Okay,
you
so
go.
here we go.
Yeah, that seems more realistic.
Yeah, 35. God, I weigh a lot. So we're at 3350 without me in it. This makes more sense. It weighs more on my side. So it's 50 pounds on the front and 60 pounds on the rear. So we got an extra 110 pounds on my side. So we would shift everything.
Well, I can sit in the car and we'll be fine.
That's true. Okay, I'm gonna get out of the car and we'll see what this looks like.
33, yeah, you're.
No, see, that's 150 pounds. 140 pounds.
It's close to 200. Which it should be. We have too much weight on my side of
Yeah.
the car. And it's
So
mostly
we can't
me.
take the passenger seat out. That's not going to help.
Yeah, it's not going to help. The car is actually pretty well balanced without me in it. It's kind of a weird thing because we have the turbo on that side, we have the diff on that side, but we lightened up the whole manifold. So if anything, we accidentally unbalanced. We have the whole drivetrain on that side. It's really impressive that we shifted everything and have the drivetrain centered to the car. We've got an issue where we've got, 110 pounds on my side that needs to be reduced before we can even finally balance the car left and right, front or down. And so I think what we're going to do, I know the common goal is like, oh, let's add weight to balance it out. I am obsessive with taking weight out of the car by any means necessary. So there's a piece of metal that I welded in years ago. I want to cut that out. It's not relevant anymore. It doesn't help with the structure of the car. We'll take the door card off of my side. I want to make as much effort to remove weight out of this side and then shift any of the rest of the weight that way before we start adding weight to the car.
Since the last time I got all these brand new clips and stuff like that, normally before I was just able to pull it off by hand, but they're like in there and they're brand new and they're nice. So this feels about like 100 pounds right here.
So if you zero out the car with me not on it, it adds 60 pounds to the front, 60 pounds to the rear, and then 46 pounds to the other rear tire. That's very fascinating.
Safety's off. And
Yeah, so our goal is to shed as much weight. We've got about 60 pounds of a goal of shedding weight out of this.
return to sender.
It's going to be a diminishing returns situation, but we'll start with the easiest stuff possible and then work our way to like making decisions whether we want to pull more out of the car. But dead weight's dead weight, and especially when it's on the side that has too much weight. It's pretty obvious what to do.
What is that?
It's draining lines for the sunroof. We definitely lost a considerable amount of weight in this corner. Now, I haven't jumped in yet, so I'm not worried about the final number, but you can see in the rear, this side is considerably lighter. The front is still heavier. Now, if this stayed like this, we could pull these two tires taller and then cross it, but because I'll be adding weight to both of these,
I see.
it won't help us, but less weight is less weight. The rears are almost even.
Oh wow, they're off by 4 pounds.
The fronts are off by 100 pounds.
Huh. So 10 pounds of 3 Gs is 30 pounds, right?
Yeah.
That's what was important about this. And what I got from Rob, we didn't take as much out because that's, if you have 100 pounds on this side, then this tire is getting 300 pounds of traction pretty much, right? At considering pulling about 3 Gs.
Those 10 pounds aren't just less weight in the car, they're also less weight on one side. So the car's gonna be more predictable and consistent, even though it's a very small amount. I think it was worth the effort. What we could do is we could balance some more things to this side if we really wanted to get real particular, but at this point it was the effort. Like he said, 10 pounds less to accelerate. They're supposed to be here at 11, so in 24 minutes to come pick up the car. We'll do as much as we can at the time. We'll clean it up, make it look pretty. Set this wing to probably be less angle of attack. We got a lot of things that we need to do. Like I need to raise the rear shocks so that way they can travel more, and I need to slow down the damping. So add damping, so that way it doesn't bounce when it hits the bottom. So there's a couple small things that'll make a big difference on the launch.
Oh yeah, it's us.
That's UPS, bro.
These are fronts?
Yeah, and yeah, somebody else has sent us something. Heaven sent front tires.
Oh wow. Really?
Yeah. We've never ran Hoosiers. We've never ran any of these, but the availability, height, size, everything wise for the front tires to be another set of rear tires lined up. So we'll have some experience with
They
these.
feel really nice.
Yeah, they're drag radials.
Competition use only, and not for highway use.
What's funny is they are FDOT though. This is basically the same thing as my Mickey Thompson's. It's a drag radial, so I'm not going bias plies. If there's radial, I don't know where it's at. My goal with these is the front tires actually aren't meant to hook harder yet. They're meant to hook the ground so I can do traction control, I can see ground speed versus all 4 tires just spinning up in the air. The front tires do not have as much of the load as the rear tires, so it's kind of a losing battle of diminishing returns, but they still spin. So the more traction we can get in the front, the more we can see how fast we're going, the more we can control and pull back the amount of power we're putting down. This is incredible, and I'm sure we'll still spin them, especially since we can't warm them up as we go, but we'll learn. Double benefit. One is that we can launch harder. Two is that we can actually get the fronts to stick. The strategy for all of these races, which is absolutely mind-bogglingly terrifying to me, is that one is power control using the electronic wastegate. That is the massive swing of power up and down. Level 2 is all-wheel drive, so sending more or less power to the front, and level 3 will be actual like ignition cut to pull it back. I used to have it where all-wheel drive would go really high. I'm actually going to pull that back a little bit so all-wheel drive does not over-engage the fronts, so they stick to the ground a little bit more, but still are providing several hundred foot-pounds of torque. But then above that, that's when we pull the power back even more, and we know, hey, okay, you know what? 12 pounds of boost is too much. Let's go to 11. And we can do that on the fly and not crash, all part of one massive strategy. So we'll see how that works very quickly. We are going to do a quick compression test before and after these 4 to 6 races, just to see what it ends up doing to the motor. And this motor is a race motor, so it's meant to be abused and rebuilt and then continue on. But we will see. Right now we turned off fuel so I can cycle everything. So
79, 88, 83. 89, 68, 79.
That one's higher.
89, 96, 85.
we're low.
Yeah.
But I'll take it. I'll take low.
It's consistent.
It's consistent. Well, it's not consistent at all, but it's consistent per rotor. This is a good example of why EGTs are not the best data, because they all come back exactly the same, even though we have different compression ratios. I'm showing you everything. We have the new tires back, thanks to Joel and CompTire getting this done like in minutes. So we're gonna go ahead and load these on here because they're gonna let us unload the car from the trailer, so we don't have to worry as much about people turning the car too hard and not knowing what they're looking for. The siren is very appropriate, because that's how I feel internally. I'm like, holy shit, all this is going on all at once. It's insane. Here's just a quick comparison of the old to the new. These are 285s, those are 315s. Rain, good track tire, I would say. Drag radial.
Wow, that's not even comparable.
No, it's considerably.
You wish to the death.
I knew they were big, but I didn't realize they were that big.
Yeah, it's gonna reduce our turning radius, but we gain that little bit more traction. I think it's worth it. That is a lot of tire. They are slightly smaller sidewall, but I think that'll work out well because we're gonna keep those slightly more inflated than the rears, so it all should even out. But I mean, I'm guessing, honestly. That's more room than I thought they'd be.
Yeah.
Much harder to turn.
Okay.
That's 180.
Okay.
You got more?
You have a lot more room than we thought, actually.
That's 270.
A little, like half of what you just turned, and you'll be done. Right there.
Okay, that's
And you're hitting front side over here, not back side.
so
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's plenty of turning. Jeez. It's just that when, like I said, when the
You
car.
wanna turn the other way to see if maybe this side's worse for whatever reason.
Yep. 180. That's 270.
All right, you're done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so same.
So 270.